The Blackstone estate sat perched above the Connecticut woods like a throne, all glass, steel, and silence. By 7 a.m., the house should have been filled with the hum of breakfast prep, the clatter of silverware, the low voice of Madeline Blackstone scrolling news on her tablet. But this morning, something was off. The house was too still. Yumi Arai, the maid, moved through the kitchen with practiced precision, boiling water, slicing melon, setting the espresso. She wore a navy uniform, spotless and pressed, her black hair tied in a bun so tight not a strand escaped. Her eyes rarely left the floor. She was a ghost in her own routine. But today, even her rhythm faltered. The espresso had been untouched since 6:30. No sign of Madeline. Yumi climbed the stairs slowly, tray in hand. The master bedroom door was ajar, the bed perfectly made, Madeline's silk robe on its hook, her phone on the vanity. But the woman herself? Gone. Yumi stood still, barely breathing. Then she saw it. A smear, not of blood, but makeup, across the mirror, as if someone had slammed a palm into it mid-sentence. And below it, lying on the carpet, a single diamond earring. By 8:45 a.m., Richard Blackstone, billionaire financier, had arrived by private helicopter from his Manhattan penthouse. The moment he stepped off the helipad, his eyes narrowed. "Where is she?" Yumi bowed slightly. "Madam is not home, sir." "What do you mean she's not home? You were the last person to see her." "I prepared breakfast as usual. She never came down." Richard stared hard at her. Yumi did not flinch. He turned to his assistant. "Call security. Call the police. Get the cameras. Now." By noon, detectives from Westport PD swarmed the estate. Lieutenant Dana Mercer led the investigation, a tall, sharp-eyed woman with little patience for luxury. She walked through the house, absorbing every sterile surface, every too-perfect vase of flowers. "You sure she didn't leave on her own?" Richard scoffed. "Without her phone, jewelry, driver?" Mercer eyed Yumi, who stood silently behind them. "You, when did you last see Mrs. Blackstone?" Yumi replied calmly. "Last evening. She asked for tea before bed. I left it outside her door." "Did you hear anything unusual overnight?" Yumi shook her head. Mercer studied her. "You don't talk much, do you?" Yumi said nothing. The security footage showed something strange. At 10:18 p.m. the previous night, Madeline walked alone into the conservatory, wearing a robe, barefoot. She looked unsteady. The camera captured her standing by the large bay window for 6 minutes. At 10:24, the image flickered. At 10:25, the feed resumed. The room was empty. No one came in, no one came out. No one saw her again. By evening, the media had caught wind of it. Harris disappears from her mansion. Blackstone family in crisis. Billionaire's wife missing in Westport. Camera vans lined the private road. Reporters shouted through the gates. Drones buzzed over the trees. Inside, the Blackstone home descended into quiet paranoia. That night, Richard paced his study with a glass of bourbon. He spoke to someone on the phone, low, urgent. Yumi stood outside, unseen, her ear just inches from the door. She threatened to go public with the foundation money. She said she had proof. Pause. "No, I didn't touch her, but if she ran, someone helped her." Pause. "We need to shut this down fast." Click. Yumi walked away. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, but her eyes were sharp, and in her pocket was the other earring. The conservatory was sealed off with yellow tape. Inside, forensics combed every inch with gloved fingers and UV lights. Lieutenant Mercer watched from the glass doorway, arms folded, brow furrowed. No signs of struggle, no prints, No forced entry, no exit. She turned to her junior officer. It's like she vanished. The junior hesitated. Unless someone knew how to avoid the cameras. Mercer glanced down the long hallway. At the end, standing silently with folded hands, was Yumi. 11:05 a.m. Staff interrogations, room B. The housekeeper, the chef, the groundskeeper, all were questioned. None had seen or heard anything. Then came Yumi. She sat across from Mercer without a lawyer. Her posture was perfect, back straight, palms on her lap, eyes lowered. Mercer studied her. You worked for the Blackstones how long? 2 years and 3 months. And before that? New York, house staff for the Gilroy family. Reason for leaving? They moved to London. Mercer scribbled something, then leaned in. Do you know anything about a place called the Whisper Room? Yumi blinked, the first break in her composure. No, ma'am. We found a mention in Mrs. Blackstone's private journal. It said, if anything happens to me, it will be in there. Still, Yumi didn't speak, but she was listening. Back in the master suite, 1:40 p.m., Lucille, the estate's longtime housekeeper, returned with Mercer. Madam kept her private notes in the bottom drawer, Lucille said, pointing to a narrow antique cabinet. Only she and the maid touched that room. The drawer was locked. Mercer picked it easily. Inside, a slim leather-bound notebook. Inside that, names, symbols, numbers, and sketches. One sketch caught Mercer's eye, a floor plan. Not of the house, but of a room that didn't exist on any blueprint. A hidden space, labeled in neat handwriting, the Whisper Room. 8:30 p.m., hidden passage. Angela, the junior officer, traced the floor plan through the west wing. Behind the old piano, beneath the wallpaper, was a seam. She pressed it. Click. A panel slid open. Behind it, narrow stone steps. Dust-filled, ancient. She called it in. Mercer arrived with 2 officers. They descended slowly. The Whisper Room wasn't much, just a square space, no windows, no vents, but on one wall hung 3 things. A whiteboard, smeared with erased writing, a microphone, disconnected, and a photo of Madeline, smiling, with her arm around Yumi. Not the maid and madam kind of photo. They were laughing, like friends. Tuesday, 7:10 a.m., Yumi's quarters. Mercer knocked once. Yumi opened the door, already dressed. Mind if I come in? Yumi stepped aside. The room was immaculate, Spartan, too perfect. Mercer scanned the desk, a stack of crossword puzzles in Japanese, a simple photo of a younger Yumi with 2 older women in kimono. You and Mrs. Blackstone, you were close? Yumi hesitated. Then softly, closer than she wanted her husband to know. Silence fell. Mercer looked up. Was it romantic? Yumi shook her head. No, it was truth. That's all. Wednesday, 9:05 a.m., Richard's study. Mercer confronted Richard. Tell me about the Whisper Room. He stiffened. That's nonsense. You had a soundproofed room built behind your walls? This house is 50 years old. I didn't build it. Mercer stepped closer. Then why is your wife's secret journal in it? And why did she write, if anything happens to me, it will be in there? He didn't answer. She dropped the photo on the desk, the one of Madeline and Yumi. The master suite was still cordoned off with yellow tape, yet beneath the polite silence of wealth and security, something mechanical stirred. Detective Angela Knoll stood with gloved hands beside the vanity mirror where the makeup smear had first been found. She'd brought in a new forensics tech from Stanford who specialized in covert surveillance systems. "It's an antique mirror," Angela noted, "but it buzzes slightly when the lights are off." The tech nodded and slipped a handheld scanner across the frame. A beep. Another. Then a soft click. The top left corner of the mirror popped open, revealing a hidden lens. "Who installs a pinhole camera inside a dressing mirror?" Mercer asked, peering into the hollowed frame. The tech replied, "Someone with a lot to hide." It was wireless, broadcast only, no internal storage. But behind the mirror, taped inside the wall, they found it. A hidden SSD drive. Mercer stared at it like it might explode. "Get it imaged, now!" Wednesday, 6:55 p.m., Police Cyber Forensics Lab. The file was encrypted, but poorly. The folder was titled Mirror 0919. Dozens of clips. The most recent, time-stamped 10:18 p.m., matched the exact moment Madeline walked into the conservatory. Mercer, Angela, and the forensics tech watched in silence as the clip played. The video. Madeline stood in front of the mirror, disheveled. She was crying, mascara streaking across her cheeks. She pressed her palms to the glass, smearing the makeup. "I can't do this anymore. He'll find out." Behind her, the door creaked. Yumi entered, silently. Madeline didn't flinch. "It's in the folder, the whisper room." Yumi moved closer, her expression unreadable. Madeline held something out, a USB stick. "Give it to her. If anything happens..." The clip cut. Mercer froze the video. Yumi's face stared back at her from the mirror's angle, calm, composed, eyes glistening. She wasn't the killer, Angela murmured. She was the only one Madeline trusted. Mercer stood up slowly. And Richard didn't know this was being recorded. Thursday, 9:10 a.m., Interrogatory Room 1. Yumi sat alone. No cuffs, no lawyer. Mercer walked in holding the USB stick, now inside an evidence bag. She placed it on the table, didn't say a word. Yumi looked at it, then slowly exhaled. She said he had embezzled over $30 million through the foundation, hidden behind child cancer grants and international donations. She was going to the FBI? Yumi nodded. She had proof. She copied the ledgers. The USB holds it. Mercer sat down across from her. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" Yumi's voice was quiet. "Because in this country, when women of color speak up, no one listens. But when they're quiet, they're feared. I needed you to fear me long enough to look." Thursday, 3:20 p.m., Evidence Review Room. The USB held dozens of files, spreadsheets, internal memos, offshore transfers, names. One name stood out, Senator William Corrick. Mercer stared at it, feeling her stomach tighten. "This goes beyond Richard. This is federal." Angela whispered, and Madeline knew it all. That night. Richard's arrest. He was taken quietly, no cuffs. A voluntary interview at first. But Richard knew. As he was led out past the marble foyer, he saw Yumi standing beside Mercer. For the first time, she looked directly at him. No bow, no fear, just silence. The kind that killed empires. The estate garden had always been pristine, a symmetrical marvel of trimmed hedges, imported stone, and perfectly placed rose beds. But tonight, under floodlights and whispers, the garden felt like a crime scene waiting to be confirmed. Detective Mercer stood at the edge of the stone path, holding the folded letter Yumi had given her earlier that evening. It wasn't addressed to the police. It was addressed to Madeline. If you're reading this, it means they've dug you up. I'm sorry I waited. I didn't want to believe you were gone. Earlier that day, Yumi had led Mercer to a particular spot, a stone bench beside a koi pond that Richard had insisted be imported from Kyoto. Yumi had paused beside a specific paving stone just in front of the bench. She had said only one sentence. She always sat here when she needed silence. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a grave. 8:05 p.m. Forensics excavation. 3 uniformed officers and a forensic archaeologist lifted the stone slabs with slow precision. Beneath them, a shallow bed of disturbed soil. Mercer crouched beside the lead digger. Scan everything. Don't disturb anything more than necessary. 15 minutes later, one of them called out softly, "We've got something." Wrapped in plastic tarp and black cloth, a bundle roughly human-sized was lifted out, bone by bone, artifact by artifact. A gold bracelet slid out of the folds. Mercer recognized it. It had been missing from Madeline's jewelry drawer. Thursday, 10:45 p.m., preliminary autopsy. The forensic pathologist confirmed it within an hour. It was Madeline Blackstone. Blunt force trauma to the back of the head, likely from behind. Estimated time of death, 10:28 p.m., minutes after the mirror video ended. Cause of death, intentional homicide. The conservatory showed no blood, no drag marks. But the whisper room? That was another story. Friday, 7:20 a.m. Evidence from the whisper room. The room had been emptied after the first sweep, but a deeper search beneath the floorboards revealed a second panel. Inside, a bloodied marble paperweight, monogrammed RB, a torn sleeve of Madeline's robe, and a voice recorder. Mercer clicked play. "Richard, stop. I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I've made copies. They'll know." "Don't be stupid, Mads. Just hand it over. It's not just about the money anymore. You've hurt people. Then you leave me no choice." A loud thud, then silence, then a soft dragging sound. Friday, 2 p.m., police briefing. Richard Blackstone was charged with first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, wire fraud, money laundering, federal conspiracy. But the most damning detail, he had buried Madeline with his own hands, then lied to police while looking Mercer in the eye. Saturday, 9 a.m., press conference. Lieutenant Mercer stepped to the podium. Dozens of reporters sat in tense silence. Thanks to the testimony of Miss Yumi Arai and evidence recovered by Westport PD, we have confirmed the murder of Madeline Blackstone. The investigation has exposed a web of financial corruption spanning years, but none of this would have come to light without a woman who chose silence not as submission, but as strategy. Yumi stood beside her, face unreadable, eyes dry. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, just a simple dark coat and a quiet strength that seemed to silence the room more than any speech could. Later that day, private room at the station. Mercer poured Yumi a cup of green tea. No more interviews, no more cameras. Just 2 women and a truth between them. Mercer finally asked, "Why didn't you leave?" Yumi stared into the steam. "Because Madeline didn't get to." The courtroom was carved in white stone and cold light. Beneath the grandeur of its marble arches, rows of reporters sat with pens poised, and a nation watched from behind their screens. At the defendant's table, Richard Blackstone adjusted his expensive cuffs, still arrogant, even in custody. His lawyers flanked him like wolves in suits. But across the room, standing with her hands folded in front of her, was Yumi Arai. No lawyers, no security, just the truth in her silence. Judge Elena Hargrave presided, a woman of steel beneath velvet robes. The court recognizes the witness, Ms. Yumi Arai. Yumi stepped forward. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but it carried. I was the maid, but I also saw everything, heard everything, and I remember every moment he thought I didn't exist. The prosecution played the audio recording found beneath the whisper room. Gasps echoed through the chamber at the sound of Madeline's voice. Then came the thud, the dragging, and Richard's recorded threat. Then you leave me no choice. Richard didn't flinch, but his lawyer whispered urgently. It was the beginning of a public unraveling. 3 more witnesses came forward. A former foundation accountant, a housekeeper from their East Hampton estate, a bodyguard who had been paid off to look the other way. Each added a thread to the web. Each confirmed that Richard had motive, means, and history. The judge's gavel came down hard by noon. The court will proceed to full trial. Outside the courtroom, 1:45 p.m., Angelique Knoll caught up to Mercer. We got something new from Madeline's safety deposit box. Mercer raised her eyebrow. Angela handed her a sealed envelope. Addressed to you from Madeline Blackstone, dated 3 days before she disappeared. Mercer opened it slowly. Inside, a handwritten letter and a small silver key. The letter. Lieutenant Mercer, if this reaches you, it means I failed to stop him, but I need you to understand something. I was never the first. There was another, years ago. She vanished like I might. Check the marble vault at the base of the koi fountain. The key will fit. Please listen to Yumi. She saw everything, but she kept my trust when no one else would. She's not just a maid. She's my voice now. Madeline Blackstone. Saturday, 7:20 p.m. Estate grounds. Floodlights illuminated the koi pond. Mercer, Angela, and a forensic team unearthed the marble tile base. Beneath it, a small, weatherproof safe. Inside, Polaroids of bruises on Madeline's arms, a medical report, and a second death certificate for a woman named Eloise Tamara. Cause of death? Undetermined. Former occupation? Housekeeper. Mercer's hands shook. She wasn't the first. Angela whispered, "This goes back years." Sunday, final scene, courthouse steps. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, but Yumi didn't stop to speak. She stepped quietly down the stairs, coat fluttering in the fall wind. At the bottom, Mercer stood waiting. "You just saved lives, you know that?" Yumi looked up, her eyes tired but firm. "I didn't save anyone. I just made sure someone was finally heard." The auditorium at Columbia University had never hosted such silence. Rows of guests, professors, activists, politicians, former housekeepers, journalists, all turned toward the stage where a single wooden podium stood beneath the banner. Justice for Madeline, 1 year later. Yumi Arai sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap. She wore a black dress, simple pearl earrings, and a scarf Madeline once gave her. Next to her sat Lieutenant Mercer, no longer in uniform. The host, A professor of human rights law adjusted the mic and cleared his throat. Today we gather to honor a woman whose death exposed not only corruption, but silence, and to recognize the one voice that dared to carry her truth. Please welcome Yumi Arai. A pause. Cameras. Yumi stood up slowly, but her hands didn't tremble. Not anymore. She stepped to the podium. The room quieted. Yumi looked out at the crowd. I was hired to be invisible. I was paid to be silent. And for a long time, I thought those were my only values. She took a deep breath. But silence is a weapon, and I learned to use it. Not to hurt, but to wait. For the moment, someone needed to be heard. She paused. Madeline Blackstone saved my life long before I helped reveal what happened to hers. She reminded me I was not a ghost. A long pause. Then she looked down, then back up. My name is not Yumi. The room froze. That was the name he gave me, a fake one, to keep me hidden. My real name is Tamira Hikari. Gasps. I was the niece of Eloise Tamira, the housekeeper who died in the Blackstone East home 5 years ago, the one they claimed had a heart attack. She didn't. Richard Blackstone hurt her, covered it up, and paid immigration to erase her file. I took this job to find out the truth, but in the end, it was Madeline who gave me back my voice. Her hands gripped the podium. So today, I speak for both of them, and for every silent woman made invisible by fear, by class, by race. A hush fell so deep it seemed holy. My name is Hikari, and I'm not afraid anymore. 6 months later, Brooklyn. Hikari stood in the kitchen of her small apartment. The walls were bare, the shelves lined with new books. She taught a community class now, English literacy for immigrant women. A girl with a headscarf smiled as Hikari corrected her sentence. Outside, the sun was setting. Not just any day. October 28th, the day that Madeline had died, and the day that Hikari had chosen to live. She placed a single white lily on her windowsill. Then she sat, pen in hand, and began to write. Dear Eloise, I kept my promise. Final scene. Memorial plaque dedication. The Blackstone Foundation was dissolved, its assets reallocated to victims of abuse. In a quiet garden near the university, a new plaque stood among blooming roses. In memory of Madeline Blackstone and Eloise Tamira. Truth buried can still bloom again. Hikari stood before it, alone, but never voiceless again.